Hey, Kevin Coy here from Kevin's Micro Homestead at selfreliantlife.com. Check them out. And I wanted to give you an update video on this project. I was a little delayed because I racked my back a couple of weeks ago, and that put me out of commission for a while. I was picking something up, kind of doing a little twister on my hands and knees out here, pulling firewood out of the dirt, and I managed to zig when I should have been zagging, and that put me down. So anyway, we're back up and running again. And what I wanted to show you was, the last time we talked, this roof was just a rotten mess up here. It was falling apart and obviously leaking all over the place, and the materials. So I got to talking with the neighbor a little bit. Turns out it was more like 30 years ago they built this, and at any rate, it wasn't something they kept up with, and so the whole thing was just falling apart in a shambles. And I thought what I was going to do was just rip all the decking off and the roofing and put some new sheathing on here and get back after it. Well, as it turned out, by the time I got all the roofing and the decking off, that the majority of the framing underneath was rotten and just falling apart. So I wound up having to go and buy all new framing and just basically started almost from just the poles back up again, which is fine. So again, this is 12 feet and it was 14 feet long. I went ahead and extended it out another 2 feet, so it's now 16 feet long. And the reason I did that is we're in a maritime climate here. We get a lot of rain in the wintertime and a lot of wind, and so I'm sort of redesigning this thing to take the abuse of the climate in the wintertime and not have to have it falling apart like it had in the prior. So a couple things I did. I just ran all new single, and what happened was, prior to that, they sort of cobbled this thing together out of whatever they had on hand, I think. And so instead of these rafters up here being full length 12-foot boards, they were two pieces together, and then they were scabbed onto, so they were laying on top of these double 2x8s right here. And so there was just a lot of mishmash of junk, and so I said, you know what, I'm just going to run some full-length 12-footers across here and two long 16-foot stringers down the sides, so they got solid wood. And then I had, I'll admit I'm doing some cobbling too. I had a lot of this material laying around, and all the sheathing was something I had setting aside out here from another project, so I went ahead and used that. And so it didn't cost me a lot. I think I spent 40 bucks, 50 bucks putting up this new framing. And then I wound up buying one extra sheet of the OSB to finish this thing out. It's actually 12 foot 3 inches because they framed outside of these. These are actually, to the outside of the 4x4s is actually 12 feet. And then they framed outside of that. If they would have thought about it, they could have moved these in 3 inches, and so they would have been an actual 12 feet. Finished. And so we had this funny little extra 3-foot thing going on, which I had to correct. At any rate, it took me about a half a day to rip the roof off and get everything pulled apart, and then the other half of the day, the next day, to frame it back up and sheet it all back in again. So we got this 1/2-inch OSB up here for a deck, and then I went ahead and tar papered it in, and that was as far as I got for the day. And then this morning here, I'm out here putting on some of the metal that I already had, and I had some extra metal laying around. So this was sort of, I was doing this on the cheap, so I had a lot of extra material laying around, so I'm just kind of working with what I got. And so let me go around the back here, and let's take a look at the top. And so this thing is just sort of built into a slope out here. You can kind of see it's a shed roof, so it's got an angle to it to shed the water off. Plus, from this side of the building to that side of the building, there's about a 1.5 foot drop from one side to the other, and all they did was run the poles up and cut them all off even to give them the roof angle they wanted. But the ground underneath is anything but level, and so we're going to have to work on some of that too. So you can see back here where I added on, the original structure stopped right here at these 4x4s, and so I went ahead and came all the way out and put another 2 feet on, and then we decked it. And so if you get up here on the ladder, I've got the 2x4 framing, the OSB subdeck right here, or roof sheathing, and then the paper on top to keep that nice and dry underneath. And then we're putting this metal roofing on, so we got a nice delta rib roofing material that we're putting on. Now, I already had these 4 sheets of metal. These are 3 foot by 10 foot pieces, and I ordered 4 more pieces that are 8 feet long by 3 feet, and they're going to get slid right underneath the back of those and probably go up underneath there a good 2 feet, so they got a good overlap, and then they'll hang off back here a little bit, so we've got a nice rain, you know, we're dropping all the rain well away from the building, so we're not getting a lot of splashback and having a problem with this, you know, the weather eating up the building over the course of things. So you can see at the top there, I've got everything laid out. We're just finishing up screwing this down, and again, a lot of wind out here. We can get some serious wind here in the wintertime from the storms coming in off the Pacific out here. So one of the things that I've got is that metal cap out in the front there, and it does a couple different things. It stops the wind from trying to get underneath that metal and lift it, which it will if it has a good opportunity, and then it also stops the rain from driving in underneath there and kind of keeps it off the front edge of that face of the building up there. So we can walk around to the other end, get a little bit closer up detail of what's going on up there, and I'll show you how we're putting that on. I'm going to walk the ladder around for my camera person, and eventually what we're going to do is frame this all in and turn it into a building. Right now it's just kind of a nice big roof where we can get underneath and get a lot of our garden tools and materials that are sitting around out of the weather. But eventually I'm working toward framing the whole thing in and turning it into an actual building that I can use as a temporary shop. So we'll get my camera person up here, and I'm going to get up on this ladder and you can see what we're up here doing. So right now I've got all the metal laid down the way I want it, and I ran a line of screws across the front of the face here, and now I'm putting on this trim piece, which is 3 by 5, and that's got me a nice cap on the front of this metal so that I can keep the weather out and the wind from lifting it. And what I'm using is some really long 1.5" roofing screws, and these are designed, you put them in with a nut driver, and they have a rubber washer, so when this thing mashes down onto the top of that metal, this squashes out underneath and creates a watertight seal. And so 1.5" long gives me a good bite through the metal and into the wood, so I don't have it lifting in the wind. And if you've ever seen a roof get pulled apart by the wind, you make sure you put the right kind of hardware on so you don't have to worry about it, because it's dangerous when these sheets are flying around out here. You don't want to be anywhere near them, they'll cut your head off. So that's what we're up to. We got the other metal ordered, and they actually shipped it in. It was the wrong profile. The ribs weren't the same as what we had, so we got it reshipped. And Home Depot was very nice and apologetic for giving us the wrong material, and they actually gave us a 50% discount, so my building keeps getting less expensive as we go. And so that was really nice of them, and I appreciate that, and they made it right with us, and we're waiting. We'll probably sometime this week that metal will be in. I'll put the rest of it on, but I am dried in. We're at the stage of called dried in, where the roof is not subject to the weather. The paper will hold any moisture out. We've had quite a bit of rain here in the last day or so, and we got it all dried up, so it's not going to cause any problems with the wood getting wet. And we did manage to get the paper on in between when the deck was nice and dry, so we don't have any moisture trapped underneath between the paper and the wood, which will rot out a building as well. So we're well on our way. And so I'm going to take these are 10-foot pieces. I'm going to run another little piece across the end down there to flesh that out, and then I'm going to run it down the sides of the building on the roof, just like this, down this side and that side, to keep any of that driving rain from getting in underneath everything. So it'll be a nice overlap right here, and that'll just kind of encase this roof real nice and keep any of the, because it rains sideways around here. I've seen it, and it's a pickle when you don't have things done right. So anyway, we're working on that today. We're going to get that finished up. We'll get the rest of the roof on probably next week, and it'll all be weathered in for the season. And the next thing is going to be starting to work on the floor framing in here. And it's starting to rain right now as we speak. And it's not supposed to rain today, but here it is. So just a little teaser here, coming up on the next video, we're going to be talking about framing this flooring in between these poles and how we're going to go about doing that so that we can, and obviously we've got